今日我哋玩嘅小品遊戲啊 ，indie game 咧係叫 Dear Esther， 呢隻一隻2008年出嘅電腦 mod 遊戲嚟嘅 demo 咁啦。咁佢之後有再出多幾個完全版嘅 game， 同埋呢個又係早幾年新出咗一個翻新版啊 Landmark Edition。遊戲公司咧係叫做 The Chinese Room 啊，咁 search 過咧原來係一間英國遊戲公司。咁啊，佢哋本嚟都係一啲整 Half-Life mod 嗰邊整咗幾個小作出嚟之後彈起嘅 game。會唔會 spoiler？ 我哋都係 skip 咗個 credit 先。呢個 game 咧應該就唔係好長嘅，獎杯話就 trophy 雞話大概3個鐘頭玩完㗎啦。咁我哋啊試下先。我哋咁睇先，依家個 walking simulator 類型嘅遊戲嚟嘅，咁所以就係一個體驗啦。我都幾中意玩呢啲遊戲嘅。我哋睇下究竟 Dear Esther， 我哋好啦，冇呢個 director commentator 先啊。我哋要揾嘅 Esther 究竟係邊個咧？
Dear Esther, I sometimes feel as if I've given birth to this island. Somewhere between the longitude and latitude, a split opened up, and it beached remotely here. No matter how hard I correlate, it remains a singularity, an alpha point in my life that refuses all hypothesis. I return each time leaving fresh markers that I hope, in the full glare of my hopelessness, will have blossomed into fresh insight in the interim.
好啦，咁係咪就喺做乜得咧？游水，我哋淨係嚟玩嚟呢個島嚟就做咩？死咗！我會浮翻上嚟嘅 ，OK。費事大家暈啊！我都係開翻嗰啲 crosshair 要啦 ，fuel wheel 係啦，開大啲。呢啲 game 咧唔適合會好容易頭暈嘅人啦，即係例如有個朋友 ban 啦，呢啲 game 呢隻 game 你一陣睇我玩好啦，聽聲好啦。OK 有得 zoom， 但係 control 啦，冇得跳喎，好似。睇唔到佢食啲咩？藍色熒光油。哇！呢個真係 walking simulator， 連個門都冇得 interact 去閂門。小島廁所。有啲鋼琴聲咁。 呢個係1、2、3個 H， 4、5個 H。我條 formula 係咩咧 ？Methane 啊，係嘛？應該類似係咁樣。search 一 search 先，我記得我冇錯。我哋向有啲 high road， 我哋 low road， 我哋 take the lower road 先。都係唔好啦，行 high road 睇到高處可以望到低。我係冇睇嗰個獎杯要求，冇睇嗰個 trophy list， 亦都冇睇個功能啊，因為3個鐘頭咁短嘅遊戲，我哋感受下個遊戲點解評價咁高先？呢個應該過到去。
Donnelly reported the legend of the hermit, a holy man who sought solitude in its most pure form. Allegedly, he rode here from the mainland in a boat without a bottom, so all the creatures of the sea could rise at night to converse with him. How disappointed he must have been with their chatter. Perhaps now, when all that haunts the ocean is the rubbish dumped from the tankers, he'd find more peace. They say he threw his arms wide in a valley on the south side, and the cliff opened up to provide him shelter. They say he died of fever 116 years later. The shepherds left gifts for him at the mouth of the cave, but Donnelly records they never claimed to have seen him. I have visited the cave and I have left my gifts, but like them, I appear to be an unworthy subject of his solitude.
Geocache 而家喺度玩緊，有燈啊嗰度。誒，穿唔翻過去我自己嗰邊。我哋被困喺呢個山窿度啦，我哋。哦，轉咗個彎啫。好大風， 一個好多垃圾嘅沙灘啊！其實講起沙灘同荒島，突然間醒起早2年睇嗰本漫畫《4個少女流落荒島高中少女》嗰本漫畫，仲未睇完喎，未結局喎嗰本。學好多逃生知識㗎嗰本嘢，唔記得叫咩避難啊定求生吧咁樣類似咁幾隻字。
When you were born, your mother told me a hush fell over the delivery room. A great red birthmark covered the left side of your face. No one knew what to say, so you cried to fill the vacuum. I always admired you for that you cried to fill whatever vacuum you found. I began to manufacture vacuums just to enable you to deploy your talent. The birthmark faded by the time you were 6 and had gone completely by the time we met, but your fascination with the empty and its cure remained. Donnelly's book had not been taken out from the library since 1974. I decided it would never be missed as I slipped it under my coat and avoided the librarian's gaze on the way out. If the subject matter is obscure, the writer's literary style is even more so. It is not the text of a stable or trustworthy reporter. Perhaps it is fitting that my only companion in these last days should be a stolen book written by a dying man. When someone had died or was dying, or was so ill they gave up what little hope they could sacrifice, they cut parallel lines into the cliff, exposing the white chalk beneath. You could see them from the mainland or the fishing boats, and know to send aid or impose a cordon of protection, and wait a generation until whatever pestilence stalked the cliff paths died along with its hosts. My lines are just for this. To keep any would-be rescuers at bay. The infection is not simply of the flesh. They were God-fearing people, those shepherds. There was no love in the relationship. Donnelly tells me that they had one Bible that was passed around in strict rotation. It was stolen by a visiting monk in 1776, 2 years before the island was abandoned altogether. In the interim, I wonder, did they assign chapter and verse to the stones and grasses, marking the geography with a superimposed significance that they could actually walk the Bible and inhabit its contradictions? Dear Esther, I met Paul. I made my own little pilgrimage. My Damascus, a small semi-detached on the outskirts of Wolverhampton. We drank coffee in his kitchen and tried to connect to one another. Although he knew I hadn't come in search of an apology, reason or retribution, he still spiraled in panic, thrown high and lucid by his own dented bonnet. Responsibility had made him old. Like us, he'd already passed beyond any conceivable boundary of life.
呢個山窿就係頭先我哋喺呢邊見到嗰個山窿啦。我都係跟住遊戲嗰條路行先，我哋呢個 playthrough 之後有機會玩獎杯嗰時，我哋先再去探索。
I threw my arms wide and the cliff opened out before me, making this rough home. I transferred my belongings from the bothy on the mount and tried to live here instead. It was cold at night, and the sea lapped at the entrance at high tide. To climb the peak, I must first venture even deeper into the veins of the island, where the signals are blocked altogether. Only then will I understand them, when I stand on the summit and they flow into me, uncorrupted.
又係同一個 formula。呢種神秘味道有啲似手塚治虫啊，漫畫之神畫三眼小子嗰種，有冇有啲事件啊？出返海，睇下邊有地方去先。冇路咯。冇啦，唔俾再去啦呢度。今次褪唔到添啦已經。
Come back.
OK， 浸死有個長官。 哋今次向上游行先。哇 ！Invisible Wall 我上得快。
I've become convinced I'm not alone here, even though I'm equally sure it is simply a delusion brought upon by circumstance. I do not, for instance, remember where I found the candles, or why I took it upon myself to light such a strange pathway. Perhaps it is only for those who are bound to follow.
熄咗個 crosshair 先，可能會容易啲頭暈嘅，所以如果頭暈嘅朋友咁就眯埋眼算啦。因為佢有咗個 crosshair 喺度唔方便啊，一路行一路影 screenshot。幾靚啊！如果自己喺個荒島咧，都嚇到傻啊！佢係咪嘗試做 VR 效果？如眼鏡咁樣。哇！好深啊！呢度。咁樣一個 area 一個 chapter。Donnelly， 好啦，完成咗第一個 chapter，The Lighthouse。
Dear Esther, I have now driven the stretch of the M5 between Exeter and Bristol over 21 times. But although I have all the reports and all the witnesses, and have cross-referenced them within a millimetre using my ordnance survey maps, I simply cannot find the location. You'd think there would be marks to serve as some evidence. It's somewhere between the turn-off for Sanford and the welcome brake services. But although I can always see it in my rear-view mirror, I have as yet been unable to pull ashore.
隱世小店。 好啦，又有條 high road 條 low road 啦。呢度係 tankers OK， 貨櫃郵輪。周圍啲嘢都係冇字冇 label， 呢個 game 冇跳，咁我哋點上去咧？
There must be a hole in the bottom of the boat. How else could new hermits have arrived?
No drink， 最尾我哋睇到，哦，
I had kidney stones and you visited me in the hospital. After the operation, when I was still half submerged in anesthetic, your outline and your speech both blurred. Now my stones have grown into an island and made their escape, and you have been rendered opaque by the car of a drunk.
應該冇得上船㗎啦，我哋繼續行返呢條路山路先。
It's only at night that this place makes any sluggish effort at life. You can see the buoy and the aerial. I've been taking to sleeping through the day in an attempt to resurrect myself. I can feel the last days drawing upon me. There's little point now in continuation. There must be something new to find here. Some nook or some cranny that offers a perspective worth clinging to. I've burnt my bridges. I've sunk my boats and watched them go to water.
呢度已經係盡頭㗎啦。冇㗎。嚟嗰邊。哦，原來呢度有條路。
What charnel house lies at the foot of this abyss? How many dead shepherds could fill this hole?
好，我哋跳落去死啊！有個獎杯係要跌死。同浸死嘅人，浸死有一個獎杯，跌死有一個獎杯。死啦！而家跌完，我唔知我邊邊啦。OK， 窿我邊啦。呢度係咪就終點咧？小屋。
I've begun to climb, away from the sea and towards the center. It is a straight line to the summit, where the evening begins to coil around the aerial and squeeze the signals into early silence. The bothy squats against the mount to avoid the gaze of the aerial. I too will creep under the island like an animal and approach it from the northern shore. The bothy was constructed originally in the early 1700s. By then, shepherding had formalized into a career. The first habitual shepherd was a man called Jacobsen, from a lineage of migratory Scandinavians. He was not considered a man of breeding by the mainlanders. He came here every summer whilst building the bothy, hoping eventually that becoming a man of property would secure him a wife and a lineage. Donnelly records that it did. He caught some disease from his malcontented goats and died 2 years after completing it. There was no one to carve white lines into the cliff for him either.
呢個又唔係 chemical diagram 喎。Nice wheel， 呢間屋呢個位好正。
When the oil lamps ran out, I didn't pick up a torch, but used the moonlight to read about. When I've pulled the last shreds of sense from it, I will throw Donnelly's book from the cliffs and perhaps myself with it. Maybe it will wash back up through the caves and erupt from the spring when the rain comes, making its return to the hermit's cave. Perhaps it will be back on the table when I wake. I think I may have thrown it into the sea several times before.
呢條友係有憂鬱症定咩？定係絕症咁悲觀？上山容易落山難。完啦，今日 chapter。聽到啲風聲嘅人都有啲打冷震，因為為咗個 heat 唔好着咁嘈到，我都冇開到 heat。
He left his body to the medical school and was duly opened out for a crowd of students 21 days after his passing. The report is included in my edition of his book. The syphilis had torn through his guts like a drunk driver, scrambling his organs like eggs on a plate. But enough definition remained for a cursory examination, and, as I suspected, they found clear evidence of kidney stones. He was likely to have spent the last years of his life in considerable pain. Perhaps this is the root of his laudanum habit. Although its use makes him an unreliable witness, I find myself increasingly drawn into his orbit. They found Jakobsen in early spring. The thaw had only just come. Even though he'd been dead nearly 7 months, his body had been frozen right down to the nerves and had not even begun to decompose. His fingernails were raw and bitten to the quick. They found the phosphorescent moss that grows in the caves deep under the nails. Whatever he'd been doing under the island when his strength began to fail is lost. He'd struggled halfway up the cliff again, perhaps in a delirium, perhaps trying to reach the Bothy's fire before curling into a stone and expiring.
喂，全部都水，我冇得跳，冇乜嘢可以做喎呢度。
Climbing down to the caves, I slipped and fell and have injured my leg. I think the femur is broken. It is clearly infected. The skin has turned a bright, tight pink, and the pain is crashing in on the waves. Winter tides against my shoreline, drowning out the ache of my stones. I struggled back to the bothy to rest, but it has become clear that there is only one way this is likely to end. The medical supplies I looted from the trawler have suddenly found their purpose. They will keep me lucid for my final ascent.
A 連串嘅不幸啊！呢度。第2章完。個獎杯係 Jacobson， 即係每個地圖可能有一條友。第一章就講個 Donnelly 嗰個本書，呢個咧就個島嗰個人裝。
Even though I wake in false dawns and find the landscape changing and flowing inconstantly through my tears, I know his reaching is always upon me.
嗰邊咧就第2條路啊，要小心啲啊！我哋。
There is no other direction, no other exit from this motorway. Speeding past this junction, I saw you waiting at the roadside, a one last drink in your trembled hands.
chemical 嗰啲可能 ethanol、methanol 嗰啲係咪當酒精啊飲？呢個又電子電路板。我冇讀 file， 所以唔知係咪其他啦。 哇！呢啲又係會俾人衝字咗衝落去喎。有啲似喺花溪4嗰啲喜馬拉雅山上面嗰啲吸毒奇緣咁樣，而家 trippy。OK， 有左右右。哇！一定電腦 PK 啊！啲青台。
In my final dream, I sat at peace with Jakobsen and watched the moon over the Sandford Junction. Goats grazed on the hard shoulder, the world gone to weed and redemption. He showed me his fever scars, and I mine, between each shoulder the nascency of flight.
我會帶我去邊呢？棘住咗。 呢個島咁多呢個地下晶體咧，係咪啲礦物太強，引嚟啲閃電啊、電波咧，天然令到啲人有病，定係會影響佢哋思想啊？呢啲係啲科幻片入面啲電波干擾到佢哋。呢班人好似 hallucinate 啊！應該我就係 Esther， 我係翻嚟揾翻個 friend。點知一路淨係揾到佢嗰啲片言隻語，即係跟住個 friend 原本個男人聲臨死之前一路行嗰條嗰個 journey。
This cannot be the shaft they threw the goats into. It cannot be the landfill where the parts of your life that would not burn ended up. It cannot be the chimney that delivered you to the skies. It cannot be the place where you rained back down again to fertilize the soil and make small flowers in the rocks.
OK， 都上唔到，唔知一定喺呢邊。睇得出有一個科學家咁嘅，邊個 whoever 留低呢啲 Beacon Barrel 嘅公仔，已經病入膏肓啊！嚟到呢個幾密集。Angry from being 啊，睇唔清個咩字。啲字寫到咁點睇啊，大佬？見到呢啲根有啲肚餓，諗起今日食歐太介紹珊瑚草啊，有啲新嘅海藻類嘅，形狀又好似咁冇味嗰啲海帶咁樣。 又過7。Come back。水底城市，死前幻覺嚟嘅啫。我哋要堅持住，返去文明入面。我哋頭先嗰個 flashback 就係提醒我哋加油。好，第3章 The Cave 完成咗啦，獎杯就係 Esther。哇！呢個仲喺山窿度，我個電筒又唔開。哦，一開始入嚟嗰個山窿，哇，好靚！
I sat here and watched 2 jets carve parallel white lines into the sky. They charted their course, and I followed them for 21 minutes until they turned off near Sanford and were lost. If I were a gull, I would abandon my nest and join them. I would starve my brain of oxygen and suffer delusions of transcendence. I would tear the bottom from my boat and sail across the motorways until I reached this island once again.
有夜光有，全 game 第一次睇得清楚啲字就係呢個罐頭嚟到呢度。 而且條橋村嘅喂。Come back.
Come back. Fire and soil, I chose fire. It seemed the more contemporary of the options, the more sanitary. I could not bear the thought of the reassembly of such a ruin. Stitching arm to shoulder and femur to hip, charting a line of thread like traffic stilled on a motorway, making it all acceptable for tearful aunts and traumatized uncles flown in specially for the occasion. Reduce to ash, mix with water, make a phosphorescent paint for these rocks and ceilings. There were chemical diagrams on the posters on the walls on the waiting room. It seemed appropriate at the time. Still life abstractions of the processes which had already begun to break down your nerves and your muscles in the next room. I crammed diazepam as I once crammed for chemistry examinations. I am revising my options for a long and happy life. From here, I can see my armada. I collected all the letters I'd ever meant to send to you, if I'd have ever made it to the mainland, but had instead collected at the bottom of my rucksack, and I spread them out along the lost beach. Then I took each and every one, and I folded them into boats. I folded you into the creases, and then, as the sun was setting, I set the fleet to sail. Shattered into 21 pieces, I consigned you to the Atlantic. And I sat here until I'd watched all of you sink.
呢個直情係一個 flashback 啊！已經唔好話一個俾 Esther 睇。Around him, a light from heaven。嗰個咩字啊？咩 ONE？咩啊 ？Now 啊？唔係。And he fell to the ground。係咪呢個？咦，着龍。On a sudden。應該完啦啩？好，撐返過嚟啦 ，OK。但係我要可以點做咧？過唔過得去？過唔過得去
？Come back. ？Man of the Rock 嘅獎杯行夠5000步，好健康啊！
冇喎，唔通行返轉頭？哦，呢度有條路上山 ，OK。係咪喺天線度？
The pain in my leg sent me blind for a few minutes as I struggled up the cliff path. I swallowed another handful of painkillers, and now I feel almost lucid. The island around me has retreated to a hazed distance, whilst the moon appears to have descended into my palm to guide me. I can see a thick black line of infection reaching for my heart from the waistband of my trousers. Through the fugue, it's all the world like the path I have cut from the lowlands towards the aerial. I've begun my voyage in a paper boat without a bottom. I will fly to the moon in it. I've been folded along a crease in time, a weakness in the sheet of life. Now you've settled on the opposite side of the paper to me. I can see your traces in the ink that soaks through the fiber, the pulped vegetation. When we become waterlogged and the cage disintegrates, we will intermingle. When this paper aeroplane leaves the cliff edge and casts parallel vapor trails in the dark, we will come together.
Prisoner of his journey. He was the prisoner of his journey. 定唔知係咪 president？ and 唔知乜 come 呢一條睇唔到 PAM 睇唔到。呢句咧睇下先，又係 and 啦 and he 就頭先嗰句咯。
If only Donnelly had experienced this, he would have realized he was his own shoreline, as am I. Just as I am becoming this island, so he became his syphilis, retreating into the burning synapses, the stones, the infection.
And he was there. 呢句係咩？睇唔到啦個字啊！
returning to my car afterwards, hands still shaking, and a head split open by the impact. Goodbye to tearful aunts and traumatized uncles. Goodbye to the phenomenal. Goodbye to the tangible. Goodbye Wolverhampton. Goodbye Sanford. Goodbye Cromer. Goodbye Damascus. This cliff path is slippery in the dew. It is hard to climb with such an infection. I must carve out the bad flesh and sling it from the aerial. I must become infused with the very air.
Has made my journey 睇唔到啦，其實個 game 點發屏有冇人想睇？
A gull perched on a spent bonnet, sideways, whilst the sirens fell through the middle distance and the metal moaned in grief about us. I'm about this night in walking. Old bread and gull bones. Old Donnelly at the bar gripping his drink. Old Esther walking with our children. Old Paul as ever. Old Paul. He shakes and he shivers and he turns off his lights alone.
所以頭先一路把聲嗰個係 Paul 啊，係咪？我哋而家已經變咗下一新人 ，Paul 嘅古仔已經完結。所以 Paul 就係揾前一人 Esther。Come into Damascus. 係咪？係咪？紅山落水。
I will send news to each and every star. Dear Esther, I have burnt my belongings, my books, this death certificate. Mine will be written all across this island. Who was Jakobsen? Who remembers him? Donnelly has written of him, but who was Donnelly? Who remembers him? I have painted, carved, hewn, scored into this space all that I could draw from him. there will be another to these shores to remember me. I will rise from the ocean like an island without bottom, come together like a stone, become an aerial, a beacon, that they will not forget you. We've always been drawn here. One day the gulls will return and nest in our bones and our history. I will look to my left and see Esther Donnelly flying beside me. I will look to my right and see Paul Jacobson flying beside me. They will leave white lines carved into the air to reach the mainland, where help will be sent.
傳承。係咪大概想講凡走過必留嘅痕跡咧？作為人死留名咁，活喺有關係嘅人嘅回憶裏。死亡本身都唔係一個恐怖嘅嘢，恐怖嘅事，呢樣嘢都不謀而合嘅。不過我自己就唔認同呢個人類要傳承啊咁樣呢 part 嘅，我覺得。 都係第4章。好，咁啊，即係完咗啦古仔。咁啊，獎杯攞咗一半啦。咁有一啲係 collectible， 同埋要聽晒所有對話嗰啲咧。咁啊，要第2個 playthrough 啦，我諗。咁會唔會聽日開台做定係自己做咧？咁啊，未決定。可以開台做一個 directory commentary 嘅 playthrough 嘅，因為我哋頭先做係冇嘅。開咗咁可能聽到一啲佢哋製作時嘅小花絮咁，玩一次咁順便睇下攞到啲獎杯啦。睇下點啦，睇下聽日或者邊日啊？聽日唔得啊！聽日我想去揾朋友玩，所以可能第2日有機會再玩呢隻 game。氣氛幾好嘅 Walking Simulator， 有啲人會覺得悶咁，其實我覺得我 OK 嘅，因為呢個係主要係睇個遊戲製造商佢想俾一個咩世界我哋睇，佢有個故仔，即係佢有啲咩説話想講。咁啊，我係中意睇人哋諗法，睇人哋聽嘅。有機會我哋再玩第2次。好，拜拜。